really assert or make, really quote unquote force people to do things. So, I briefly mentioned the Arms Export Control Act and the Foreign Assistance Act. And what you as a campus need to do and should be doing is really trying to pressure, writing letters, really trying to pressure congressional members, political members, to actually enforce the Arms Export and Control Act and the Foreign Assistance Act to trigger. I mean, both of them have been triggered because Israel has engaged in flagrant human rights abuses. And us supplying weapons, continuing to supply weapons to Israel is actually illegal. 1982, a much less progressive president, Ronald Reagan, he actually stopped the funding of cluster munitions to Israel after Sabra and Shatila. So there is a precedent for this. There is a precedent where the U.S. government actually stops the funding of munitions and arms to Israel when Israel engages in flagrant human rights abuses. So, one thing that I really would ask people to do, we released a report. I totally forgot to bring copies of the report. We released a report, and it's located on our website, the NLG website, nlg.org. It's called Onslaught: Israel's Attack on Gaza and the Rule of Law. If you go to the NLG website, it's on the right-hand side, and you can get a PDF, and it actually talks more about the Arms Export Control Act, the Foreign Assistance Act. But really, just really need to build up that pressure, and the way that pressure is going to happen is if we ourselves empower ourselves and really make demands. LA, in this area is very pro, I was just watching Vieta Gosa at the APAC conference. It's very pro-Israeli in the sense that blind support of Israel. And, it's time that we need to shift that power balance and not ask anything more than just the applicability of law. Like, let's enforce the laws that we've created. And two of those laws are the Foreign Assistance Act and the Arms Export Control Act. So really, I have documents that I can share with you guys on sample letters and really, even though a lot of people are like, oh, lobbying, nothing ever changes. Well, nothing ever changes is because we don't have the attitude of like, let's change things and let's make things different. So we need to empower ourselves and say, let's change things and let's actually utilize the system, this democratic system that we have, and tell them, let's enforce our laws. So I'd be more than happy to share the documents that I have and sample letters that I have, and please do engage and please do really push for the enforcement of the AECA and the FAA.
I think there's some.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your presentation. I thought it was really well-researched and an amazing job. However, I do wonder why you don't question the very premise of the war, in which Israel disrupted a legitimately elected government, fomented civil war by funding and arming Fatah, and basically did everything it could to accelerate its conflict with Hamas. And I also wonder why you don't maybe bring up other political points, such as its need to sort of recoup its image after its defeat in Lebanon. And I was wondering whether you addressed the issue of dishonest politics in your work with the ACLU or otherwise. I was wondering whether you addressed the issue of dishonest politics in your work with the ACLU.
Totally missed that word.
Dishonest politics in your work with the ACLU or otherwise. Thank you.
That was like a lot of questions packed into one, so I have like a really bad memory. So one thing is that I'm doing this on my personal behalf. This is not anything to do with ACLU. But, okay, I'm trying to remember the questions again. So what's question number one?
Well,
can you actually just ask me like maybe one or two questions, because I know other people want to.
Well, they're all related. Basically, I just wanted to sort of, I got a lot of your presentation and I was like a really wonderful job. I didn't get a sense of the political
dynamics, right?
And I wanted to know, so I didn't see some happening in the fact that Israel disrupted a legitimately elected government. The fact that it sort of worked behind the scenes to sort of set up Fatah as a company to Hamas. A lot of, if you listen to all histories, it's quite clear that Fatah was receiving funding. So I was sort of wondering why you want to sort of address the sort of political context of this conflict and everything that sort of happened to lead up to it.
one thing. One of the problems is time constraint, right? I have an hour, and I want to try to talk about what I saw on the ground. And I think that's one thing that we don't hear much about. There's a lot of talk about this, Israel did this, and Hamas did that, and Israel did this, and Hamas did that. And so, for me, there's definitely a huge political history to it that extends beyond just this year or last year. This has been 60 years, right? And so if I wanted to go down that history, I would need a lot longer of time for that. I mean, one thing that I would say is that, again, this goes to the self-defense issue, is that, Israel itself has admitted itself that they have been planning this attack for at least 6 months now, 6 months before the actual attack happened. And so this was something that was premeditated, it was pre-planned, which makes it a very offensive move and not defensive at all. And this stuff is these are stuff that came out in Israeli newspapers themselves. This is not, pro-Palestinian stuff at all. And then as far as the dynamics of Hamas and Fatah, that is definitely something that is happening. You definitely see, it's really interesting if you look at the history, just look at the history of Israel's dynamics with Hamas, with Fatah. Fatah, historically was just like Hamas. Israel treated Fatah the same way that it treated Hamas. It was a terrorist organization. They were completely, outlawed and blah, 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 blah. And now Fatah has become, Israel's baby. Why can't Hamas be like Fatah? Why can't Gaza be like the West Bank? So it's really divide and conquer, playing with these various political agencies to develop this kind of division between internal divisions between the parties, by making some parties good and making other parties bad. So that's kind of not really an answer to your question, but really, that's just the time constraint. And one thing that I've noticed too is that as soon as you say anything about, go and say anything about the history of it, and history is extremely important, but as soon as you say anything about the history, people, you'll have people jump on you and say, well, no, what about da-da-da-da-da, and it's and then you lose the reality of what I am trying to say, which is that Israel breached international humanitarian law. In those 22 days, Israel breached international humanitarian law and it committed war crimes by attacking civilians, by attacking civilian infrastructure, by using weapons illegally, and by preventing medical access. And that's one thing that I've found constantly. If you talk about history, it's people will forget the forest and they'll focus on the trees. So let's look at the forest, which is that Israel committed flagrant human rights abuses. And us as American citizens and as Americans, we need to make sure that our government is held accountable and does not help fund this in the future. So.